It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media business industrial complex, just churning out labor for our enjoyment and our passions. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. Yeah, it's the sports world churns out labor. I like how you said that. Yeah, all is well. I mean, it's a little bit of a kind of a slow time. You know, right before the NFL season starts, the Olympics are over. You know, in terms of sports business, we found some good stuff, but it took a little doing to find it, I think. But yeah, anyway, I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good, all things considered. Yeah, that's interesting. This is one of those times, right? Like there's the kind of the drudgery of training camp, the drudgery of sort of late season baseball, especially if you're not in a pennant race, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of stuff's not happening. So I find it, a smart move that the Major League Baseball and their broadcast partner Fox decided to try this stunt. And I say that in a non-pejorative way, but try this stunt with this Field of Dream game at this time in the sports calendar. And by all metrics, buzz, viewership, interest, it seemed like it was a success.
First of all, that was a transition of a pro, man. That really was. I got to applaud you for the transition there. First of all, I missed the whole game. I wish I could have watched it, but it was right in the middle of the Washington-New England game, and I couldn't watch it. But
I didn't watch it either.
Yeah, but they've been the mystical they, primarily meaning the people who own that farm, which is a real farm in the middle of nowhere in Iowa, have been trying to do stuff like this forever, almost since the movie started. You know, they've been trying to get Major League Baseball there. They've tried to get other things there. It was a museum, I think, maybe at one point in time. It was like open to the public. So this is not something that Major League Baseball and whoever owns that cornfield dreamed up in 5 minutes. This game in particular has been in planning since 2015. So this is a long time coming. Obviously the game was perfect. The White Sox, which are the subject of the movie, if you don't know, this goes back to what, late 80s maybe, this movie, I think, roughly?
I'll look it up while you go on.
All right. So, but the for those of you who haven't seen it because you're too young to see it, the movie was basically Kevin Costner owned this farm, and his dad was a player on the Chicago Black Sox team that got suspended for gambling in the late 20s, I believe it was. And so he keeps hearing these mystical voices that says, if you build it, they will come. Eventually, he, for no reason, seemingly to the people around him, builds this cornfield, or builds this baseball field out of cornfield, and his father and the Chicago Black Sox walk out of the cornfield, and he gets to play catch with his dad. That's the movie. And so it's the perfect baseball thing, and so that's why they've been trying to do this forever. And the year was...
Yep, you're pretty close on both your historical guesses. So the movie release was 1989, and the Black Sox scandal, which he's referencing with the Chicago White Sox, was 1919.
Oh, okay. I was off by a decade. Yeah.
But yeah, pretty close. And if we just, because baseball movie is a rabbit hole, in and of itself. But if you want to see a good movie as well about the Black Sox scandal, maybe watch this first and then Field of Dreams if you're doing baseball movie rewatches or first time, is 8 Men Out. So that'll give you the kind of biopic version of the scandal, and then you watch the sort of magical realism of Field of Dreams.
Yeah, the gist of the Black Sox scandal is that the White Sox players accepted money to throw the game to whoever they were playing. That was the gist of the scandal, and they all got basically thrown out of baseball forever. That's a scandal. And so the subject of the movie was, because that happened, Kevin Costner's dad never got to fulfill his dream, basically, and the kid Costner character never got to see it. And so when he builds his cornfield, the dad and the White Sox come out of the corn, and it sort of completes a circle, and that's the movie. So it's a charming movie. I'm not the biggest Field of Dreams movie. I thought it was a bit corny, No pun intended. It's not my favorite baseball movie, but I'm obnoxious like that. But point is, so this is the scenario, and of course the Yankees, they're the only team you can, if you're trying to emulate a game from the 20s, the Yankees are the only team to have. So it was the Yankees in the White Sox, and of course it ended with a walk-off home run, literally with fireworks going off in the background. The interesting thing about this is, did you see the production? Oh, by the way, the article I read about it. Every media outlet had an article, but what I was reading was from the Athletic. Richard Deesh, is that how you pronounce his name? From Thursday, August 12th. They had playoff level production value. 39, I think it was 50 cameras and 39 microphones. Crazy, drones flying around. Crazy production. I wish I had seen it. But it looked like it was a wonderful game. I have some fears, which we'll get to, but Chris, your thoughts?
Well, one, I think the fact that we both didn't see it and now have some FOMO about it probably is another good indicator that it was a success, right? Like, I have some regret that I didn't watch it, and if they did, and it makes me more, play catch up on doing a version 2 or something similar. I agree, Field of Dreams is not on my baseball movie, probably even top 5. Much more Bad News Bears than Field of Dreams in terms of my outlook on life. Then as well is what people. It's so funny because these cultural things that people don't necessarily know the origin, but probably many of you have heard they build it and they will come as just a cliche in the culture. Well, there's the movie. It comes from that movie, so a reference to that. I agree with you on all fronts. I think what's really fascinating is it was success, and it's a sign of a little bit of baseball desperation, right? Because when you have to manufacture buzz, what it really reminds me of, which I actually think, while I could be cynical about, and there's definitely a critique embedded here, is actually kind of cool as well. It's a AAA farm team style, hook to get people into the baseball stadium, right? Into watching on their TV. It's old timey night, or it's glazed donut hamburger night. It's a very similar thing. At the
hamburger night.
That's a thing.
Who knew? If you like to kill yourself, that's a good way to do it. Yeah, no, it's definitely a gimmick. Now, here's the problem, though. Say they did this once. All media companies and Hollywood and sports all screw this up. You did it once. At the risk of a really bad pun, you hit a home run with this game. Everybody loved it. The ratings were enormous. Probably only the Redskins and Washington Patriots fans, didn't watch it. And had that not happened, I would have watched it, and Chris probably would have watched it at that game. They're going to screw it up. I promise you they're screw up, because they're going to do this over and over and over and over again until it becomes kind of a sad parody of itself. That's why we have had 9 Fast and Furious movies. That's why the NHL Winter Classic has been going every year forever, and nobody cares about it now. It was really cool in the beginning. Even I watched it. I'm not a huge hockey fan, but baseball's going to overdo it over and over and over again, and they're going to mess it up. I promise you. They should let this go. Here's what I think, Chris. If you want to have a fun game like that, pick some other fun sites to do it. Go back, do one in... where's the Baseball Hall of Fame up there in New York? I can't remember the name of the
Cooperstown.
Town. Yeah, thank you. Do a game in Cooperstown. Go back to wherever baseball was invented. Whatever. Yeah, I guess it's probably Cooperstown. But you could do it in fun places around the country. Pick some other little farm town. But if you're going to redo the baseball field in Iowa thing again, it's never going to be better, and you got to let it go. Have it be a one-time great thing.
Totally agree. In fact, but we know that's the spirit of the Athletic article that we referenced, is that was a hit. Expect to see more. I think was some version of the headline. Listen, if I was sitting around their borrowed room too, we'd be saying, "Give me more of that." And event television is what gets eyeballs into live television. So whether it's them redoing Grease as a live musical or whatever, right? These are the things. Event TV is one of their techniques. So I get it, and they're not going to stop. So get creative about it. What I'd love to see, building on what you said, Steve, which would actually be interesting, is no sport is as documented and as beloved in movies as baseball. Just repeat that. Go do one in North Carolina. Do it in the Bull Durham Stadium. You know,
Perfect idea.
You know, have Brad Pitt walk out in a members only jacket as Billy Bean and do one. You know, do a Moneyball. Do the Natural. I mean, you know, like that. That would be totally fun. And then it gives you kind of a new production value. That means it's the same gimmick but different look, feel, narrative. Like that would actually be super fun. So if they bring some creativity to it and not just wash, rinse, repeat, they can get away with it. But yeah, if they did one next August, I would probably, like I said, I'd probably tune in just because I felt like a lame-o that I missed the first one. But I don't, you don't need to recreate that 6-7 times.
It's kind of like dating your ex-wife. You know, it's just you're never gonna ever beat it. It's never gonna be better. And for the record, baseball has already announced that they will be back at that same cornfield next year, and it's just dumb. Yeah, for those who don't remember, the Naturals, Robert Redford in the early '80s. I think it's I know
early
it's
mid, no later than mid '80s.
Yeah, and I can't remember the premise of that movie, but it was a much better movie than Field of Dreams. But he was Redford played a really old character who was like injured, and he hit a home run that bounced off the scoreboard, and then the scoreboard blew up in like fireworks style at the end. But I can't remember really the premise of the movie.
84. The premise was he was started out as a phenom pitcher, and there's a classic scene of him striking out Babe Ruth at like a barnstorming event, or even like just something pickup. And he ends up getting shot by an angry husband, who I can't remember if he's actually sleeping with the guy's wife or just whatever. He gets shot, and he has to rebuild himself as a slugger. So then he comes back, like he crawls his way back, and then has his shining moment.
And this was fiction, though, I believe.
Yeah. Yes, it was fiction.
Yeah, but point is, but that was for the crowd that's our era. That's another great but there's a ton of great baseball movies. You could do Bad News Bears night if you wanted to. You could. There's so many baseball movies. I'm begging Major League Baseball, just don't beat this into the ground, because I know you will. Because your marketing people are gonna make you. But I promise you it will not go well. It'll be a little bit less next year. A little bit fewer people will pay attention. You're never going to duplicate the drama of having the Chicago White Sox of all teams win on a walk-off with fireworks going off in the back. That you will never beat it.
Right. Embrace the gimmick. Don't embrace this gimmick.
This is Star Wars movie 9 thing we're talking about. Just stop. So, it's a ton of fun, though. Everybody seemed to love it. I was tempted to go back and watch the game anyway, just to see what it was like, even though I know how it ended, But it's kind of a... I guess baseball is really the only sport that could do this, because basketball doesn't have these. Basketball's too young. The NFL has been around... for 100 years, but there isn't the mystique about football that there is baseball in this country. There isn't. No. There's a reason why baseball was always called America's sport and all that stuff. What are you going to do in football? Recreate the Al Pacino speech, maybe? I mean, it just doesn't feel the same to me.
No, I mean, baseball's a myth. Football's the reality, so... I totally agree. And nor do they need to, by the way. I mean, that's also the other thing. The NFL doesn't need to create many gimmicks to keep eyeballs. In fact, I think even London is an example of gimmick. And I would say, outside of their own business concerns, it's not really a fan service type of thing, because I don't think fans care.
I don't think it's a fan service at all. I think it's their inroads trying to build an audience in Europe to have a team there. Because here's the thing. I don't think you can have just a team in London. It doesn't really work to me. I don't know how that's in any way equitable if you have to have the Seattle Seahawks playing the London Monarchs or whatever, and you've got 12 hours of travel and across, what is that, 9 time zones, I think. I think what you sort of have, if NFL wants to expand to Europe, you sort of have to have a European division with 4 teams. Otherwise, I don't know how it's equitable any other way. The problem is there's no market for there's you can maybe build one, and they're trying in England, and then there's a small contingent of people like football in Germany. Beyond that, there's no market for it because they're all soccer fans. So
Yeah,
I
it's a
think
hard business case.
yeah, so I think London is their hope upon hope against hope that at some point they're going to have enough of a market to actually have a football team in London. That's what I think they're doing there. I don't think it's a gimmick at all in terms of the fan. It's actually annoying for football fans in America because the games come on at like 7 in the morning or earlier than that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I just think they cynically sort of sell it as something special when really no one thinks it is.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the game in London.
Yeah,
Ooh, oh, who
no one
cares?
cares.
So what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that you mentioned it earlier. The Winter Classic's a great. It was the inspiration for an event like this, and it's the cautionary tale, which is like after a while, like the event just loses its luster.
Yeah, nobody cares about the Winter Classic now. I mean, maybe the hardcore hockey fans do, but I'm not a huge hockey fan. But I watched that first Winter Classic, and it goes back a ways now.
Now they have two outdoor games.
Oh, dude, see, I didn't even know that.
And which is kind of funny. And so kids at home, you always need more heroin to get the first effect. But and that game's actually even slightly more popular because it's not like connected to a time in the calendar. It's not New Year's Day. It's just kind of like a random outside game in the year. That's a kind of a more like throwback Thursdays at the ballpark type of thing. But yeah, it's like you're just chasing the dragon after a while.
That's a good point. That's a good analogy. Drugs, because the first hit is always the best.
Yeah.
And then after that, I mean, your mind is releasing chemicals and endorphins and stuff that, basically cause you to do more and more and more and more. And that's what addiction is, And so the idea here that they can top the Field of Dreams game is an impossibility. And so they're never going to live up to it. They're always going to be chasing the dragon, as you said, to recreate that high. It's never going to work, ever. But yeah, the great thing to me, you could chase some movie sets for a while, but yeah, go play at some classic AAA team somewhere. Go
right.
Have the Dodgers and the Yankees go play in Missouri or somewhere, or whatever team, the Cubs. You pick your classic teams. At some AAA park, that would be cool. But the point is, they'd have, in order to make this a thing, they can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. They've got to come up with different and creative things. Leave the Field of Dream things where it belongs, let it go, and then come up with a fun game a year. That would be something cool. But I know they won't. I know baseball's going to beat this into the ground until we're sick of it.
Yeah, inspiration, not repetition. All right, now the next thing is, and this is a story that we checked in on a few times. There's some interesting updates. The Reebok brand is on the move again. As you might remember, Adidas actually owned the Reebok brand and was trying to integrate it into their brands and try to, as basically sort of, arming themselves in their war with Nike. But now has selling it to a group called ARG, which has been sniffing around the brand for some time. And
it's ABG, Chris.
ABG. There we go. And it's a bit of a brand, a glass menagerie as its business model. Give us the details, Steve.
Yeah, so we saw this on Front Office Sports. This is by Justin Byers, dated August 12, 2021. And the background here is Adidas is trying to compete with the megaopolis that is Nike, and to do that they've expanded their brands. So the idea here was Reebok at one point in time was very, very popular. Again, this goes back decades, not anymore, but I think Adidas thought they could use Reebok to help kind of spur the war against Nike, and I'm all for that. I'm gonna do you a favor, Chris, not getting into that. But the point is that is totally bombed. Reebok hasn't done anything. It hasn't tapped the public consciousness at all, more so than it was. They haven't tapped the youth market. Is where the market is for this stuff. It's not people like us. It's the high school kids. And so the result of this is that Adidas is trying to offload Reebok now. Now, here's the interesting part. So they bought Reebok in 2005 for $3.8 billion. Now they're selling it years later, 15 years, 16 years later for 2.5 billion. So the brand has actually shrunk, and they're taking a loss in real dollars. So that's ignoring inflation. So the real loss is twice that. But think about some of these numbers here. This is all from the Front Office Sports. The brand lost more than $100 million in 2020. It generated 1.5 billion in revenue last year, which was down from 1.8 billion in 2019. I didn't know this. It had an apparel deal with UFC. The UFC kicked it to the curb. Didn't renew the deal at all. Now ABG, this is one of these companies that's huge that nobody knows about. They own a whole bunch of brands. Nine West, Brooks Brothers, Prince Sports, Tap Out, Volcom. All these are big names, especially in the youth market. And by youth, I mean like 18 to 25 type of market. And so I think this ABG company isn't looking at Reebok to revitalize anything. It's just another brand of them. The bigger story here is that this is Adidas surrendering to me. They're saying we can't, we tried. We can't compete with Nike like this. We're going to have to take another tack. So that's what I took out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at a Wikipedia list of all of their holdings, and it's really interesting, actually. It's almost either all sports or fashion. But they own, or whatever licensing agreement, I'm not exactly sure. But, with some direct athletes like Muhammad Ali's brand, Julius Erving's brand, Shaquille O'Neal's brand. They have other sports holdings like Sports Illustrated, for instance. We, in fact, probably talked about them when we talked about Sports Illustrated bouncing around. So they own that brand. And then a Greg Norman brand. And then a bunch of stuff like Barney's of New York and Forever 21 and a bunch of other sort of straight clothing, apparel, fashion, lifestyle brands. So it's super interesting. Yeah, these kind of companies that, it's interesting. They don't necessarily buy them. It's not like that sort of takeover where you buy it for parts and sell it for parts, and deconstruct a company. It's almost like you probably still fire lots of people, I would imagine, but you want to keep that brand, right? You're buying it for the name recognition. They would prefer people understand Reebok as a brand, but it's just going to operate on the back end like all of these other businesses.
Well, it's kind of like Sports Illustrated is a pretty good example. Sports Illustrated, I've been a subscriber for 30 years at least, probably more. And it's totally dropped out of the public consciousness. It got just crushed by ESPN. The magazine went from weekly to monthly. The website is almost gone. And this ABG didn't buy Sports Illustrated to revitalize ABG at all. They're just buying it for pennies on the dollar to hopefully rebuild it into something that makes money. And that's exactly what they're doing with Reebok. They're not trying to make Reebok into the center of the culture wars or anything. They just got it for a song, and so they bought it. And it sounds like a lot of those brands that they have are kind of in the same boat. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. They're just trying to make a little money, and that's it. So, to me, I think this is Reebok or Adidas sort of acknowledging that they just can't compete with Nike at that level. Because Adidas is sort of the only brand that's even close to Nike, and they're not in the same stratosphere in terms of global influence, money, all of that. And I think this is a throwing in the towel moment.
Yeah, most likely. I do find it interesting. A couple things. One, next time you're walking through your local mall, just assume that 1 out of every 5 stores you see is probably a brand owned and operated by ARG.
Yeah.
Or ABG. Now I lost my second point.
It totally went out. You're getting old, Chris.
I know. I am getting old. Anyway, there it is. Shoes are so dumb.
I mean, yes, I agree with you, but from a marketing perspective, shoes are very much a thing for young people.
Oh yeah,
and brands, and I was just never into that. But Reebok has never been able to recapture the magic. You have to go back to when we were kids, and Reebok was a thing then in terms of something that was popular and people liked and had a sort of a place in the culture wars. Today, it's at zero. There is no place for Reebok at all. And Adidas, this whole thing, Adidas buying Reebok, is them trying to make it a thing. And now that it failed, ABG is going to take it and just, they got it for a song and they're going to sell what they can.
It is kind of one. It must be valuable to them to some degree, because one little piece of interesting news is this sale kind of had some stops and starts. And while Adidas is still going to take a bath on this, from terms of their investment, ABG I think ends up paying double what a deal that they walked away from like 6 months ago.
Yeah, no, that's true. And why that is, who knows? We'd have to dive into their numbers. Excuse me. So what he's talking about here is ABG made an initial offer in May for $1 billion, and they withdrew the bid. This is all according to this Front Office Sports article. They withdrew the bid 2 months later because of Adidas's demands that ABG operate the brand as a standalone business. Now they're paying double the initial bid. So yeah, if I said it was $1 billion up front, I misspoke. The current bid was $2 billion, and apparently that clause that making Adidas demand that they operate as a standalone brand, I think is gone. So ABG is taking a bath on the sale, but Adidas is still losing a ton of money, and that's, again, it's not even counting the inflation. They're really taking a much bigger hit if you're talking about the value of 15 years of inflation of the dollar.
And they're doing some. It's really fascinating because this ABG, I mean, they're busy because just in June, so what was that, a month and a half ago, they announced that they acquired Izod, Van Heusen, Arrow, and Jeffrey Bean. So they're on a spending spree.
But they're not trying to reinvent the culture wars.
No,
they're just trying to make money. That's the point. They're just trying to make. Who owns ABG? Can you tell?
No, that I don't know. Or I have. Oh, well, no.
Authentic Brands Group, by the way, is what ABG stands for, and the total purchase price is $2.5 billion.
It is kind of wild that an undervalued asset's still $2.5
billion. Yeah, that seems like a whole lot for Reebok, doesn't it? I mean, how many shoes do you have to sell to make up a $2.5 billion purchase price? I wouldn't have guessed it would have been worth that much at all. Not even close. I would have guessed $700 or $800 million if you'd asked me, at most.
I remember we talked about this when we talked about them buying Sports Illustrated, was that, remember, they want to do it, maybe turn it towards gambling and leverage the brand on products. So actually the Sports Illustrated example is kind of, you can start to see what some of their strategies are, where there's enough brand cachet that they slap it on a barbecue sauce or whatever. I think they're going to fail with the
Sports Illustrated thing. I mean, I still like the magazine, but nobody cares about Sports Illustrated at all. Their problem was, I think Sports Illustrated was almost too sophisticated for its own good. Because they're not doing sort of like what ESPN does, and I have a whole lot of criticisms of ESPN, and that's another topic for another day, I guess. But the brilliance of what they did is they became the go-to source of record for real-time sports information. You want to know what's happening in the Milwaukee Brewers Minnesota Twins game. It's in the fifth inning. You can go to ESPN. Everybody goes to ESPN to find out. Sports Illustrated became kind of the highbrow consumers look at sports. Let's do a deep dive into serious issues. And when you're talking about that, that's a limited market. I love it, but I don't think you're going to talk too many 15-year-olds into loving that. And so I think that was the downfall in today's no attention span marketplace. I think that's the downfall of Sports Illustrated, and this ABG has really not revitalized it at all. They tried, and it didn't work. The Sports Illustrated website's strange, and it's just not nearly as good as what ESPN provides, and they're still not trying to be a direct competitor. So this just tells me that this ABG company, again, they're not really trying to revitalize anything. They're just trying to buy some brands and hopefully sell some shoes, and that's it,
It's so fascinating because this is people, performers, musicians, performers, athletes, they're basically in the same rarefied air when we talk about these kind of things. But this ABG just outright bought Julius Irving's name and likeness. They own Julius Irving, obviously not the person, but they own any financial benefit from the name and likeness of Julius Irving. It's similar to what you see in the music industry. You might have seen headlines like Red Hot Chili Peppers sell their publishing for $75 million, or Bob Dylan, I think, just recently sold all of his. So it's like, when these artists or athletes start getting older, and there's like that one final payday, and they just bundle up and sell their name and likeness for
of course, what
Bob Dylan
didn't sell his name, image, and likeness. Dylan sold the publishing rights to his catalog.
No, he said his catalog.
And like Chris knows, like, I at one point was toying with Pink Floyd as a theme song for the show, and it became a major hassle. But there's some company that owns Pink Floyd's rights too that I was trying to deal with. And that's a little bit different. I didn't even know Julius Irving had done that. I didn't, nor did I know Shaq had a brand. I don't know what value Julius Irving has nowadays. I guess a little bit. I mean, what are they selling with Julius Irving?
I'm not even sure. But you're right. It's not. It's more is more strategy, right? So if you just own enough of these and they all have a return of whatever, even if the margin's 8 or 9%, but you own 75 things that are performing at margins of 5 to 20%, and you don't really have to do that much except for keep the brand stapled to things. It's not a bad business model.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
I would guess.
They're not, like Adidas is trying to reinvent the culture wars. And they're trying to compete with Nike because, the mystique of Nike goes beyond just selling shoes. They've dipped their toe into politics, which I strongly disagree with. They have a place in the culture wars, and Adidas is trying to compete with them on that level and failing. And ABG is not trying to do that at all. So if you get sent to ABG, it's kind of like you're out of the game. You're no longer a part of that stuff, and that's where Reebok has been relegated. For better or for worse. If you're a Reebok fan, just know that your brand is no longer hip. That's what we can conclude from this. Is hip still a word?
It's still a word. All right, so we'll move to whether hip is still a word, to whether Deshaun Watson is still a legitimate NFL quarterback, and not because of anything that he's done on the field, where obviously he'd probably be anyone's top 5, but everyone knows this unfolding drama that is now have a whiff of criminality to it. A lot of people said, for months have said, where are the criminal charges? And they seem to be coming.
We talked about this when it first happened, 6 months ago, something like that. So there were 23 lawsuits filed. One of them is dropped. And so there were 22 lawsuits still hanging around. And I read all of them so you don't have to, because they're very ugly. The allegations are ugly. There are different degrees of ugly. There were a handful, like 2 or 3, that were alleging serious, big-time sexual assault, really awful things. Like him forcing these women, like grabbing their head and putting it on as junk, serious things. And then they go down to things like, he takes his junk and touches their hand with it. There's different degrees of the allegations here. Those are all civil lawsuits. We've been hearing for months that some of these women have been talking to the Houston Police Department. Now there's a grand jury investigation. That's what's new has happened. That's why we're talking about this, one, because the season's about to start, and 2, now there's a grand jury investigation. And so this is Harris County district attorney who's started the grand jury. Grand juries usually indict. They don't always, but they do usually indict. We'll see. But the problem with any investigation like this is there's not a ton of evidence. You're not going to find, probably, you may, but I doubt you're going to find a blue dress. Which is a reference to the Bill Clinton sex scandal, when the woman whose name I can't remember kept the blue dress that Bill spilled his seed on.
Linda Hunt.
Linda.
Linda.
Oh God, Linda's
Oh yeah, Linda
the
Hunt's
first
an
name.
actress.
Wasn't Linda Hunt though, but I can't remember. But
Tripp. Linda Tripp.
yeah,
Linda
there
Tripp.
you go. Linda Tripp. Linda Tripp kept the blue dress. Unless there's a blue dress, which I bet there isn't. There's not a ton. It's really he said, she said, and so they're digging around for evidence and digging around for evidence. Here's the question, though, Chris. This is why I wanted to do this. Why isn't he on the commissioner's exempt list? I have theories. Why isn't he on the commissioner's exempt list? Now the Texans are preparing for it because they were like playing him at safety. He's like four string on their depth chart. He hadn't played, he hadn't practiced. So the Texans
travel.
Yeah. Why hasn't the NFL suspended this man?
Yeah, I think that's a huge question, and this story actually blew up kind of early in the preseason, or early in the off season. Then it just became whatever drip of information. It kind of quieted down, but what I find interesting is two stories around him started to circulate right before this. One, what you were just talking about, this buried on the depth chart, not traveling with a team, basically. The Texans just putting him in bubble wrap because they don't know what's going to happen, and if they can swindle somebody into trading for him, they certainly don't want to jeopardize. They're going to put him on the shelf because they want to make sure he's at least physically okay if they can find a taker. And and the NFL rumor mill is its own thing, but there was the rumor mill about a trade to Philadelphia really bubbled recently and then cooled off immediately. And you have to wonder if it's about if the Eagles were willing to put their toes in the water when it was civil suits and it gets more serious on the grand jury side, if they just pull the plug. But the Texans they really are over a barrel on this one.
I was thinking back through the history of the NFL, and I can't remember another player who's had this many accusations thrown against him all at once. Darren Sharper's about the only one I can think of. Darren Sharper's in prison now.
And that was after he was done playing, right? Wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
It was after he's done playing. He got accused of multiple rape allegations in multiple jurisdictions, and he had federal charges, and he's in prison where he deserves to be and should be. Beyond him, I mean, there's been a whole bunch of people who've been accused of isolated incidents here and there. I can't remember a single other case in my lifetime in the NFL where somebody's been accused of being a serial predator like this. And so it's uncharted territory a little bit, and I frankly think it's a disgrace. It is a disgrace that the NFL has ignored this. Now I have some theories, and because I'm going to be controversial here, so get ready. I'm warning you now. I think the NFL is caught a little bit between multiple priorities. Number one, they're very lax to suspend a franchise quarterback. Number two, in today's cultural climate, they are very lax to suspend a black quarterback. At the same time, they have 22 different women, most of whom are minorities, all of whom are female. And so the NFL is trapped between, the NFL has clearly indicated in the past month even that they are fully on board, much to the chagrin of me and others, with sort of the way the world is trending culturally with regard to race. And I think they are very lax to suspend a black quarterback in Deshaun Watson. And but at the same time, I don't know how you can call yourselves an advocate for women's rights as they do with that Get Pink thing and all that when you're just going to let a dude get accused by 22 times and they totally ignore it. So I think the NFL ought to be ashamed of itself, but I think they are truly caught between woke priorities, if you will. That's part of what's going on here. In my view, Chris, you may agree or disagree.
I mean, I'm not, that's all just be conjecture. I mean, I think that's...
It's definitely conjecture. It's just me it is the definition of conjecture.
I agree that I think they are making an error in not putting this guy on ice. I think, and I actually don't think they'd get... I think if they are in fact... If what you say is motivating them, I don't think there would be the pushback. I think they're over fear of what would be the result here. So They're over placating that, I'd say, where I don't think that would actually even arise. I just don't. I totally agree. I mean, the NFL. I mean, this is where having a ridiculously heavy hand makes it, when you then take a light touch, be very strange. And the NFL has prided itself on being a strict disciplinarian. Due process is, Roger Goodell's whims, so on and so forth. So, when they take no action after probably overreacting at times, it really stands out, and it opens you up to these kind of questions. And I think everybody, by the way, including Deshaun Watson, would be best served to take, what's he doing on a roster? Is he going to play? Is he a tradable asset? Help the Texans out here a little bit. Just put him on the whatever that Goodell's
it's
list
the commissioner's
is.
exempt
Yeah.
list.
Just do it. It's best for all involved. And it takes the questions out.
Yeah, well, because you're right. Because, the Texans are in a very difficult spot. What do you do with this guy? They can't take the chance and let him start. And are you going to parade him out as the face of your franchise in the city of Houston, where 22 women are accusing him of, sexual misconduct? You can't do that. The NFL's put the Texans in a very bad spot, and they ought to be ashamed of themselves. And in terms of tradability, I mean, Jesus. I think, here's my Oliver Stone theory on this. And I may have said this before in our other time we did Watson, but Deshaun Watson signed a ginormous contract. Okay, it is 4 years, $156 million, and this was signed. Let me tell you when. Signed September 5th, 2020. So he signed through 2024, and basically the team does not have an out from a dead cap, salary cap perspective until the end of the 2023 season. So they are locked in. He signed through 2025, excuse me. So they are locked into this guy for the next 3 years. Why on earth would this guy, Watson, sign this contract and become immediately unhappy? All of a sudden, the Texans are the worst thing ever, and he's not going to play with them ever again. He's refusing and this and that, even though he's got $110 million guaranteed. That's crazy. And everybody wondering why he was doing this, now we know, I think. I think Deshaun Watson saw this coming. You don't, being an attorney myself, you don't just get 22 lawsuits dropped on you out of thin air, okay? There's demand letters going back and forth. There's phone calls. I think he knew this was coming, and this was his wanting to get out of Houston was his way of running from this problem, I think. Now, in terms of trade value, who would give a bag of chips for a guy with this level of PR problem and legal problem? And the Eagles, didn't they just get rid of Carson Wentz to go with Jalen Hurts, and now you're going to give up on Jalen Hurts before he's even played a down in the 2021 season? That never made any sense whatsoever to me. But I think that's what this is. This is Deshaun Watson. His unhappiness was him trying to run from his problems.
It's certainly interesting timing on all fronts, for sure. And I think before, whenever that is, in September, Thursday Night Football kicks off, I think the NFL will have put him on the commissioner's list. I think at some point they're going to have to. It just makes the most sense. I don't think Houston kicks off with him even being available to be on their roster.
And that was the excuse we heard all off season. Why haven't they done it now? Well, the season isn't, in play. But now they've had preseason games. I don't know why they didn't do it before the preseason game. Take that. They should have. The league has an obligation. See, here's the thing. NFL teams don't really have the authority to discipline players. That right is reserved to the NFL. All the Texans can do is cut him. And suffer the financial consequences if they do, which would be enormous. It's the NFL, through the collective bargaining agreement, that has reserved the right to punish players for anything but minor infractions. And so when you do that, you're putting the Texans in a very bad situation when it is your responsibility. It is Rodgers' responsibility to do this, and they have truly just turned a blind eye to it completely. Somebody out there listening to this, name me another active player in any American sport. I can't speak because people have been murdered in soccer. I'll ignore soccer. Baseball, hockey, basketball, football. Name a player who's had this many sexual or any type of misconduct allegations against him. Even the guys like Aaron Hernandez, who was accused of murder, it was 2 incidents. And murder's worse. Beyond Aaron Hernandez, I can't think of any. And why the NFL has abdicated their responsibilities here.
Yeah, no, it's a mystery, I think, and I do think it'll come to a head soon enough. Now,
I'll repeat. Sorry, Chris, but I'll repeat another thing. What Deshaun should have done 6 months ago is take his $27 million signing bonus and distribute that equally among 22 women. That's what he should have done. He should have settled those cases immediately. It would be by far better for him in the long run if he could have settled them all. They all get non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements. None of them testify against him. It goes away. Yes, it would have been a huge financial hit, but he can afford it. He just signed a huge contract. That would have been best for him long term, and then everybody could pretend that nothing, all is well, and this would have eventually gone away. But by just doing nothing, I think he's put himself in a far worse position.
We will see. This is definitely going to be a storyline, an off-the-field storyline of the season, for sure.
Want to do an over and under as a win? The NFL is going to suspend him.
Well, let's say whatever. What's 8:05 kickoff of the Thursday night game? What is that? It's on September something.
Yeah, first week in September. It might be the 5th. No, sorry, that's August. Oh, sorry. The 2nd of September, maybe. Is that the date?
I'm looking it up.
The Jeopardy theme song is playing right now. Do, 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 do. And the answer is... You're going to make me keep vamping here over and over and over again, Chris.
I know. Well, you can edit it. It's at 8:20. Where is the date?
Okay, it's not August. You're going to make me do this. Okay.
I'm looking at the announcement article, and it doesn't actually have the date.
Okay, so...
September 9th.
Yeah. Okay, so 1 week after what I said. Yeah, I mean, are they going to wait till September 8th? Are they going to not do it at all? Maybe like DraftKings or somebody needs to have some prop bets on this. Let's at least make some money on it.
Well, here, we'll set the line. The over-under is 8:20 on September 9th, which is when foot will hit ball to kick off the NFL season.
Okay, and we'll do a straight yes or no bet. Are they going to suspend him at all? And the line is going to have to be skewed heavily towards yes. But if you want to bet no, we'll take that bet too.
Yeah, right. House always wins. Yeah, so super fascinating. Speaking of NFL quarterbacks who've made more money by what they've done off the field than on, is a fascinating article that ran in Sports Illustrated, which is by Andrew Brandt, who was a former Packers, I think, front office official, who's gone on to be a sports business writer and commentator.
I believe he's a lawyer at like Penn State or somewhere. Don't hold me to Penn State, but somewhere. Yeah, Villanova, maybe. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it's Villanova. He put together what he called introducing the Business of Football Hall of Fame. Now, this isn't like Pete Rozelle for TV contracts or Jerry Jones for stadium marketing. This is players who have been able to get themselves great deals for not actually doing much on the field. It's very weighted heavily towards quarterbacks. I'll just run down the top quarterbacks in his list. So in the introductory class in this Hall of Fame, Sam Bradford, Chase Daniels, who I want to return to, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Kirk Cousins, Alex Smith. See a trend.
I'm just laughing.
Nick Foles. So those are that's the quarterback wing of the good contract, mediocre to bad play Hall of Fame. But then we also the full on bust wing, because those ones above are various. They're not really busts. Jamarcus Russell,
Bust.
and then non quarterbacks. So this wing, everybody else: Larry Fitzgerald, Sue, Darrell Revis, and Tremaine Johnson. So
some of those are like Larry Fitzgerald's a Hall of Famer. I can't argue about his money. The funny ones really are the first group. Sam Bradford. Sam Bradford's the archetype of this, and he got basically lucky. He was the last one. He got drafted number 1, and the year after he got drafted, the NFL changed the rookie salary structure and put caps on rookie contracts. So he is the pinnacle of rookie earnings. And then on top of that, he got multiple other contracts after that because he had potential, but he just never could stay healthy. He was always hurt.
$130 million over 9 seasons, in which Brandt calls him Bradford's remarkable ability to cash in at every opportunity makes him the face of the business of football Hall of Fame. But I think the patron saint of this is got to be Chase Daniels.
Oh, yeah.
Who has made $38.9 million over 12 seasons, and he's currently on the Chargers roster, so the gravy train keeps on rolling. Now, obviously, that's not as much as Sam Bradford, but this guy has started 5 NFL games in 12 seasons. He's made $8 million per start for his NFL career. The ability of this dude to just, and they say in here that it's because he's such a good guy. He's smart in the quarterback room. He's a coach's best friend. He's a quarterback coach number 2, and that kind of reputation and soft skills approach has made this guy over almost $40 million. And by the way, without much wear and tear on his body.
He has had 261 pass attempts in the NFL. Since 2010. I mean, he's passed for 1,694 yards, which is a third of a season for a
mediocre quarterback.
Yeah, well, for a guy who passes a lot, like a Tom Brady, that's a third of a season. Yeah, he is the archetype. He's done nothing but stand on the sideline and hold a clipboard for an entire career. I applaud him. I salute him. He's my hero. I've always said the best job in the world is third string NFL quarterback. Now there's not a lot of job security for it, but when you can do what Chase Daniels done, this man is my hero, truly.
Yeah.
The other frightening thing about this, I mean, the trend. How many of these guys are former Washington quarterbacks? My God. Kirk Cousins, Alex Smith. Who else was it? I mean, Fitzpatrick is now with us.
Well, Chase Daniel couldn't make Jim Zorn's team.
Yeah.
How much better NFL, well, not in terms of playing, but Zorn is, I don't even think, involved in football. And maybe he's a high school coach somewhere. I think legitimately he's got something that level. And Chase Daniel's still banking, right? But he couldn't make Jim Zorn's team. Yeah, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Kirk Cousins. Now, Kirk Cousins is interesting because Kirk Cousins, where Sam Bradford is kind of the innovator, and Chase Daniels is the sort of like patron saint. Kirk Cousins is, what we all know his story, but that might be the most precision, the most scientific version of this story too, where he was just able to flip every opportunity into max dollars.
Yeah, I think Kirk Cousins is sort of the modern day Sam Bradford to a certain extent because he's never lived up to. I guess you could say that Cousins is 4th round draft pick, so maybe that's not a fair comparison. Cousins outplayed his 4th round draft pick status, but he keeps getting paid and keeps not living up to the contract. And by the way, Jim Zorn's, since we were talking about funny things, Jim Zorn's last job was 2020 head coach of something called the Seattle Dragons. whatever that is. I don't know if it's probably, I don't know if that's Arena League or one of these other XFL or whatever, but that's what he was. Now he's not doing anything. So that's Jim Zorn. Like Jamarcus Russell, that's a function of him being in the old rookie system. He got a huge contract as a rookie. He was a drug addict and a bust. The end. Larry Fitzgerald, I don't decry him at all. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Who else? Name those other guys at the last list.
That one's a result of actually high performing for a long time.
Right.
And Ndamukong Suh, and that's pretty clear. And he's able to just he got a huge deal, and then he's done well as a mercenary, basically. Good 1-year contracts, and he's competed. He's contributed to the Super Bowl winner. Darrell Revis, as we all remember,
he was Darrell Revis is a guy who was a high performer, but he was really a contract whore, and he kept holding out over and over again, insisting on getting these huge contracts, and these teams let him put up with this nonsense for years. They should have let him go.
A very, and I'm sure you know this, Steve, but a very fascinating Washington football team connection on terms of that as well, because I think his uncle, what was the defensive lineman that held out for a whole year and then we traded for the 2 first-round draft picks?
Oh, God. That was his uncle?
That's his uncle. And not only that, it was his uncle and his business manager during that. So one of the most legendary contract leverage guys, which, this is back when the Washington football team used to actually do stuff like this well, because
Gilbert. Is that who
Sean Gilbert.
Yeah.
Yes, that's his uncle and was his business manager during his playing days, and which is what. So that philosophy, he applied that philosophy that he did with his own career to his nephews.
Yeah, that was in the 90s, and the Redskins, back then the Redskins, tagged him twice, and then he
sat out for a whole year. Yeah, he sat for a whole year.
Yeah, and so Sean Gilbert is teaching his young cousin, Darrell Revis, how to do this, and Darrell was more successful, I guess, at it. But
the Redskins got 2 first-round draft picks. That was, you know who that? It was Chris Samuels and LeVar Arrington.
Right, both of whom were much more successful than Sean Gilbert ever was. Yeah. Although LeVar Arrington's probably the subject of it's just business topic all by himself someday if we ever get bored. Anyway, so that's a fun article. You got to applaud these guys for making that much money and producing so little, with the exception of Larry Fitzgerald. Kudos to hat tip to him.
And Revis is probably a Hall of Famer or borderline. So some of these guys, it's not necessarily
he was at least
a commentary.
A quality pro at a minimum.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But he did make $124 million in 11 seasons.
I'm here. If you ever want to give money out to the poor, I'm here.
And you probably weren't watching it, but the one thing that made Darrell Revis kind of his contract negotiation at that time famous was, remember, it was the Jets was one of the ones. Because he's held a couple teams for hostage, but the Jets were where he kind of made his bones here, and it was during their Hard Knocks season.
I remember. Oh yeah.
And so when eventually when the Jets, which I can't remember the GM's name, he bounced around. He was with Dolphins.
Tannenbaum was the guy. Right?
Yes, that's right. When he went to finally negotiate the deal, they did it at some place called the Roscoe Diner, which is actually about 25 minutes away from me right now, and actually a great famous diner. But they had this clandestine meeting at the Roscoe Diner deep in the Western Catskills to hammer out the contract.
It sounds like some of the place Jimmy Hoffa got murdered.
Yeah, well, there's probably a good amount of gangland connections to the Roscoe Diner. Yes.
Well, I remember the Hard Knocks. It was like a every episode drama with that announcer voice, and Darrell Revis remains on the sidelines. And
Revis Island no longer open, whatever. So there you go. So enjoy it. It's a fun list. It's not necessarily an indictment on some of these players, like obviously Revis or Larry Fitzgerald, or even to some degree Kirk Cousins, right? But they, for whatever bouillabaisse of circumstances, were able to have contracts that stripped their play on the field.
Everybody ought to admire what Chase Daniel has done.
Yes,
you
for
can
sure.
marry my daughter, Chase. I don't have a daughter, but you could marry her if I did.
And hey, it's a good lesson. Be nice and useful in the office, and you get kept around.
There you go.
So there we go, Steve. Now I assume things are heating up. And what are you all chatting about? on the Hogsty.
Yeah, well, we're getting ready to kick into the 2 show per week mode here in a couple weeks, which is fun for a while, and then by week like 15, no longer fun when the team is out of it and we're still having to slog through it. Hopefully it will be different this year, but we'll see. So that's coming back around. Seasons of Discontent is fully on board here as Rick Snyder is gearing up for the season as well, and we have all of our regular written content.
There you go. I'll give one plug to nothing that I'm involved with, but I just thoroughly enjoyed it and figured some of the listeners out here might as well, and that is the Robert Mays article in The Athletic about the career of Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's long. It's got tons of, old coaches, players, and stuff like that. It is a great profile piece. So if you want to get a little bit deeper into Fitz magic and a legend of, check out Robert Mays' piece in The Athletic.
Yeah, I kind of skimmed through it. I need to read it. It was what I saw was really good.
Yeah, it's interesting. All right, we'll see you in 2 weeks.